Right, well, let me backtrack and let me start this again. Tony, very much. Thank you very much for joining us for this Global Thought session. I know you're extremely busy, so we're going to get right to this. With the hope that Albert Fox can join us whenever he can. I know he's a very busy man, especially. But the format of this is just basically we're going to talk. May ask you some questions. Just share us your opinions on things, especially regarding Cuba, and then we'll take questions from the others here. But the first question I have for you, just to get the ball rolling, is Summit of the Americas. Why is Cuba not there?
Because we decided not to invite them, because we decided to stick to the language of the Inter-American Charter, saying that only democratically elected countries can participate in the Summit of the Americas. But I actually think it's really bad, just bad policy, excluding the most problematic countries in the region, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, because in the discourse of human relations and diplomatic relations, it's always better to at least talk with your neighbor face to face. I think would be constructive and informative for the parties to listen to each other. We have some very serious issues, and they're not going to be addressed in part because Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are not in the room. And I agree. I don't like their versions of government, but that's what they've got. In life, in order to move forward, we've got to deal with the reality of the situation. There's a difference between the way we would like things to be as opposed to the way things are. And we've got to deal with that reality first. Those countries have different governments, different leaderships that we have serious questions, issues, and concerns about, because we've been impacted. The entire region is impacted by those countries. But the entire region is impacted by a whole host of things that I didn't see any real attention being paid to. What am I talking about? We're not talking about the migration problem. They're not talking about the violence problem. They're not talking about the drug war, the failed drug war policies that we have. They're not talking about creating economic development opportunity zones to fight the poverty that drives all of this migration. And then we also have to talk about the corruption that is endemic to a lot of these governments. But it's all interrelated, in part also with the failed drug policy. And it's unfortunate for the United States, because as the host country, this is not going to look well in the immediate or in the long term. And it's a lost opportunity, because we should be using every opportunity to be engaging our neighbors, because we want to be able to say, that we've tried, we did this, we've done that. And taking these, what I would call, lack of better words, arrogant, well, we're not going to talk to you because you're not democratically elected. That doesn't make sense. Those governments are still there, and they're very much in control of those countries and decide what happens to the millions of people that live in those countries. So we have to talk as neighbors and start looking at resolving these issues.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think once Mr. Fox, if he can make it here, we'd love to hear his position and his view on this. I'm going to give you another name, because I want to see Matt, in Vale and Tamara, if you know this other name in Florida. If I say to you, Val Demings, Tony, what can you say about her? What do we need to know about her and her view on Cuba?
Well, Val Demings, Congresswoman Demings, first let me say I admire her. I feel in a way for her, because she has gone on a very risky journey politically. She had a safe House seat in Orlando, and she gave that up because the Democratic Party elites, that's a lack of better words, decided she would be the best candidate in face to go up against Marco Rubio. Instead of allowing the primary election process, pick the best candidate out of the people that want to be US Senator. And Val, knows nothing about Cuba. She hasn't been to the island. She's being handled by people who parroted the same talking points that Marco Rubio has. So we don't know what's her distinction. What is she going to offer different to the state of Florida in the US Senate? And by the way, the position of United States Senator from Florida has tremendous amount, as we know, of influence when it comes to US-Cuba policy in Latin America. So I'm looking at my camera because all the different screens are all the way to the right. So that's what you see me looking to my.
No, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
That's fine. I can try. No, go ahead.
I don't think she has a good position. I don't think she knows anything about Cuba. She should go to Cuba and, ascertain facts on the ground. I would say that to any candidate, because you're going to be hearing the extremes on every side of this issue. And it's important, if you're going to be in a position of elected leadership, to have your own experience and question and test theories and statements that you've heard from different parties. Also meet and talk to the people. And she hasn't done that. So we're looking at a situation where we're going to have a candidate, if she gets the nomination, who really doesn't know much about the issue of Cuba. And that's too bad. So we'll see what happens. I really would like, and I challenged her in the name of fair competition, to debate Cuba policy with the other Democratic candidates. It's only fair and appropriate to the voters to decide, what the position should be, or at least know, if I give you my vote, this is what you're going to stand for and what you're going to do in the Senate. But we don't really have a distinct picture coming from Val as opposed to Marco Rubio. And that's unfortunate for the voters in Florida.
A couple weeks ago, we had Brett Stevens in town, who, as you know, is the columnist for the New York Times. He's conservative. I do respect some of the things that he says. He gave a talk, and I asked him point blank, if you were advising President Biden right now, what advice would you give him in terms of a policy towards Cuba that would make the people in Miami, or the Democrats and the Republicans, the conservatives and the liberals, happy? What would be a good thing to do? And you know what he said? He said, look, that's not our issue. That's Cuba. Cuba has to take care of it. The United States, we were not going to get involved. And I thought he was, taking the easy way out. He was pulling himself back and say, well, that's all Cuba. He's putting it all on Cuba. He wouldn't even address the issue about the embargo, for example. And it was too bad. What do you think about that?
Well, he does have a point, because I don't think the politicians are being honest or level with the voters in Florida or anything on this particular issue, because we are not going to militarily invade Cuba. That's not even on the table. And it hasn't been in 60 years. Cuba does not pose that kind of threat to the United States. And so if that is a reality, why do we continue to go along a path that just makes things worse for everybody, which is what is the embargo? The embargo is indiscriminate harm on the entire Cuban question. And we also are not, we're getting in the way of the critical discourse and conversation that the Cuban people have to have with each other, because they're in an existential crisis. But we're in the way of that. We need to extract ourselves out of that. No one's saying by getting rid of the embargo that we have to become best buddies with Cuba and do all kinds of business and everything. But at a very basic level, we should be able to sell and buy food, agriculture, medicine, exchange in all these areas where there's a lot of common ground, and there's nothing to be lost. If you change the environment, that will be the environment that will help change. But there are people that want violent overthrow, and that's just not in the cards. That's not going to happen. And so let's deal with reality, and let's also be accountable for our policies. I mean, the Cuban embargo is like most unaccountable foreign policy of the United States that we've had. And it's only in place out of the notion that you'll get some political mileage out of it if you're running for president, you're running for office. There's no upside, and this has to change. And it's even tragic for the people of Florida, because the state that's going to benefit the most economically from ending the embargo is the state of Florida. And by the way, when you get rid of the embargo, the real power of Cuban Americans will be able to be turned on, because there is another aspect to this whole debate that people don't realize. You've got a Cuban diaspora, the majority which lives in the United States and represents about 10% of the Cuban population, that has the same economic, or excuse me, not the same, greater economic power than the country of Cuba itself. That's real negotiating power. And it's the same people. And we could be using that power to leverage all kinds of changes and progress. Because, I mean, the Cuban system is just like the hardliners in Miami. Nobody wants to change. Nobody wants to yield. Everybody wants to dig in their heels, come hell or high water. And meanwhile, the country is falling apart. Look what just happened with the rainstorms, all the buildings that have fallen apart. And you have this intransigence. And part of it's because we're in the way. I mean, we hear this battle between the slogans, patria y muerte, patria y vida. Well, the slogan that I think that really Cuba needs is one called reconciliación y reconstrucción, reconciliation and reconstruction. And that's what we need to be creating policies and engaging Cuba that drives the two sides to those 2 points, because I do believe it is possible. But, and I go back because to this, because my first time I went to Cuba, people ask me, well, how did you even get involved in all this? As corny as it sounds, I was inspired by a dream. When I first went to Cuba in 1999, I dreamed the day that Cuba and the United States reconciled. And I was a contributing force to that. And the day when that happens is going to be called the National Day of Cuban and American Reconciliation. And all of this stuff will change and end, and all of these hostilities. I'm opposed to the embargo and the sanctions. I think Helms-Burton Act is unconstitutional, and it's unfortunate that President Biden hasn't instructed the Justice Department to just get rid of that, because it's hammered it has hammered the executive's authority to properly conduct foreign policy. That said, I also think that the political and economic system of Cuba is also a failure, because people have left. There's no competition. I said, because as a person, I am opposed to monopolies and oligopolies. And you have a political system and an economic system that's basically a monopoly, does not tolerate competition. It's this lack of accountability. You have to have all systems, economic systems require a level of accountability. And when they're not doing what they're supposed to. And The vision I have is one where you have a creative, dynamic market that's building new, better products, providing better services, and under a spirit of fair competition. That if you're not delivering what you're supposed to, you're out of the box. Your competitor gets in the box, but you don't have a political system or economic system that does that. And I'm opposed to monopolies regardless. Like capitalism, socialism, none of that stuff works. And so we need to kind of stimulate this. Like I say to people with that, they say, well, if you get rid of the embargo, you're going to have, they're going to get Cuba's getting money from tourism. Well, it's true. Tourism is a lifeline to Cuba, but I got news for Cuba. Most people that go to Cuba go because they're curious, but but I don't believe that Cuba can compete with other tourist destinations, but they haven't been allowed to either because part of the embargo, but even with their own system. So they're going to have to compete to attract that tourism market to get that repeat business. So we just need to extract ourselves out of that, unfortunate equation. I really support the idea of, dealing in reality, accountability, and working on the only thing that we do have control over, which is we have control over the embargo. We do not have control what happens inside of Cuba. We can only influence what happens there, but our interfering has worked against us, and it actually has worked against the Cuban people. There is this crazy, symbiotic, symmetrical relationship between the Cuban government and the hardliners in Miami. And it's almost like whatever each side one does, they respond in kind with the same intolerance and just that intransigence. That has got to change. People have to realize, hey, this is a policy that has not worked. Why do we insist on continuing it? So these are some of my thoughts about this policy in general.
Well, I was in Cuba. I lived there for 7 years, and I was there when President Obama visited, and he was just like a megastar. And I remember the day after he left, I think it was the Communist Party asked a journalist to do a hatchet job on him. And so he titled this journalist, this title, and Vale, you may know this expression, Obama está haciendo el sueco. He's being Swiss. Or Swedish. Basically saying he's trying to lie to us. He's telling us one thing, but he's doing another. That same day that article came out, he received over 3,000 angry phone calls from Cubans everywhere around the island, letting him have it. Say, that's the president of the United States. You're not going to talk to him like that. And he had to apologize the next day. So I think it's without a doubt, Cubans want to have a good relationship with the United States.
Cubans and Americans love each other.
Absolutely.
It's where our destinies are tied together.
Absolutely.
There's no question in my mind about that. It's just what kind of relationship. We got to stop being the parent, and Cuba's got to stop being the child.
Right. I think you're completely right. And I think basically, to continue with your metaphor, the embargo is the step parent, right? Because that's what's really making Cuba suffer. I mean, it was a couple of years ago, and Matt, you may have heard of this, but there was a horrendous plane crash in Havana that killed over 100 people when it was taking off. That plane, because of the embargo, because almost every plane in the world has some component that was made in the United States, and so it was banned by the embargo. They had to buy a plane, a very cheaply made plane from Mexico, and it hadn't passed inspection, but Cuba was desperate for it, so they used it. It didn't go well. It crashed, killed over 100 people. One person somehow survived. I don't know how they did that, but those are the type of issues I always try and tell Americans, because here where I am in upstate New York, it's very conservative, and people keep telling me, well, Tom, we have to keep the embargo in place until things get better. It's like, no, you don't see the sights, the effect of the embargo on people. I was there in February, and there's a huge shortage of medicine and food, and the inflation is through the roof. And so the next question I have for you is this. In next month is going to be, I think, what, the 7th of July, when we had the unrest there, the political unrest and all the protests. How do you see that playing now when it's going to be the 1-year anniversary? Do you think anything's going to happen, or is it just going to be another ho hum day?
I don't believe anything's going to happen. You know, what there are people that really would like to instigate and start a war. And problem is, there's a thing called the fog of war and unintended consequences. And plus, people die and property gets destroyed when you resort to violence. And besides, the United States, at least so far, is not going to be engaging in any type of military action in Cuba. Cuba is not pointing missiles at us. Cuba wants to be our friend, for goodness sakes. And we're insisting that they can't be friends with us. And it's sad, it's tragic, because the Cuban people are great. And, you know, they have to figure this out. But it's part of human nature to have that, I don't know if you want to call it emotional maturity or humility, to say, hey, I was wrong, we were wrong. I apologize, we apologize. We're going to make changes. We can do better, and we will do better. That is sometimes the most difficult thing. And I can say that as an attorney who's facilitated settlements and negotiations. But we can help create an environment that's conducive to that kind of situation. And I hope that, not I hope, I said I look forward to getting there. I was very proud of the fact that the mention of, I had a blog called uscubapolitics.com and uscubapolitica.com. And in May of 2012, I actually predicted, and I wrote what essentially was as if it was a transcript of a US-Cuba reset in relations. And I got it almost 100%. I was only wrong about, in the scenario that I had published, I had the FBI in Havana picking up all our American fugitives, and that just everything was cooperative. But now everything else, the freedom of the Cuban Five and the Alan Gross and taking a new approach, that all came to fruition. But obviously, my dream is still yet to come true. So we'll keep working for that National Day of Reconciliation and Reconstruction. I think we can be doing, I mean, Cuban Americans could be doing a tremendous thing. People want to invest, people want to build there. We could be creating a Cuban American Reconstruction Bank for Reconstruction, literally putting money there and saying, when conditions are right, we're going to just build projects and all kinds of things to help Cuba recover. And maybe the Cubans can figure out a way to allow some competition in their political system, hold their leaders accountable. There has to be. Otherwise, what's the point in exercising power if it's not there to actually serve the people? And, you know, something else that I have in my traveling to Cuba, the only people that I've met that actually support the Cuban government and the Cuban Communist Party are either Cuban Communist Party members or Cuban government officials. I've never met an average Cuban. When I've talked to Cubans and they look around to see if nobody, they tell me in Spanish, listen, I'll tell you honestly, they're like, when is this ever going to change? When will this change? And why is it so hard for the Cuban government to make changes? They can provide healthcare to all of their people. They can provide education to all of their people. So why does it have to be in a system that's so intolerant, that's a monopoly, because it's only trying to keep itself in existence instead of providing the services that the people need from the government? Where does power, it's a political science question, where does power devolve to the government? It comes from the people.
Comes from the people.
And so, but if the government's not accountable to the people, well, then who is it accountable to? So these are the things that Cuba has to figure out. It is not going to work if the United States, through hostility and through isolation, vengeance, humiliation, all of these things that we've tried and continue for the last 60 years, it's never going to work. So let's accept the reality and try something else. You know?
Well, I think that those are good points. I think I when I was in Cuba, I used to always frequently joke, but it really isn't far removed from reality, that for many Americans, Cuban history began on January 1st, 1959. So the revolution, you know, blah, blah, blah. Cuba was fine until Fidel and Che came along, but they completely forget about Machado and Batista. They don't know about the history, and they certainly don't know about the interventions, the many interventions that the US government has had in Cuba. So I think
Parent-child dynamic that we're talking about.
Absolutely. It's I think, and this, you're completely right. I agree with everything you just said. I think for the United States, if we could actually put more education and a little more focus on the Cuban history before the revolution, so people know and they have context, and say, look, hey, this revolution, rather, it had to happen to change what they had. Batista was certainly no angel. You know, and certainly now we know what the last 60 years have been. But many Americans don't know what happened before 1959. And just I'm going to put a little plug for this very good book I read. You may know it. It's called Cuba: An American History by Ada Ferrer, the historian
Yes.
from New York University. It's excellent.
Pulitzer Prize. She won the Pulitzer Prize. Recommend that book to everyone. Get it. It's available on Amazon, on Audible. Fantastic book.
Isn't it? It is.
Prize. Ada earned it. Fantastic. I'm so happy for her. You know, I want to bring up another issue that's really real going on right now. And that's this whole issue with the Cuban family reunification program. That is a bureaucratic mess. They have families basically stranded, stuck in Guyana, waiting to get their visas. Some of them placed on administrative processing that has no deadline. There's no deadline, it's indefinite. And these people have been paying, you know, amounts of money that the smugglers charge. And it's shameful because it is a breakdown of US government service and what we're supposed to be doing. You know, and I don't even understand, and this is how I'll say, that none of the Congress people in Florida care about this problem, but they do want their votes and they do want their money. But meanwhile, there are kids stuck there. There's this lady, and I tweeted out her name, Yatiel, whose husband's going to have, has colon cancer and is going to have chemotherapy and is having surgery on the 9th. And she would like to be with her husband. And they held her visa under administrative processing. And I can't imagine how not only how she feels, but how her US citizen husband feels that his wife, in a time that he absolutely needs her, where it's life and death, and she can't be there because of bureaucratic nonsense. If I was a congressman or a senator, I'd be asking a whole bunch of questions. How the hell did Guyana get selected as the place to process CFRP? I would also be asking, very detailed, I would add requests from the State Department, a 90-day plan to have the US consulate in Havana up and running full capacity. I want to know what it's going to take. And they're not doing it. And it's like, and they can, and these members of Congress can. Nobody cares enough to fly down and take a look and like I use the term, ascertain facts on the ground. And then people wonder why, people in government wonder why people are so cynical and mistrustful. It's a total breakdown of this like social contract the government has with people, and level with them, but you're going to tell me we can't come up with a plan to have our consulate back up at full capacity in 90 days? Let's say that that's really logistically not possible. Well, come up with a 4-month plan, or come back up with a plan that we can say to the people, here's the plan, here are the phases, this is how we're going to do it. For goodness sakes, that's their job. And that's the job of the members of Congress. So this is like, Val Demings wants to, be senator. Demings, give me a break. She could go and help that lady right now. She could pick up the phone and call up the Department of Homeland Secretary Mayorkas, could call up Secretary Blinken, say, listen, I don't care, just make it happen. This lady needs to be with her husband. Please get this thing processed now. And believe it or not, members of Congress do have that kind of power, because what do you think the Cuban Americans in Congress, who are all on the pro-embargo side, what do you think they did before Obama? They would call up and say, hey, you better do this, or you better do that. Or, we're not going to be passing, we're going to be holding up budgets, we're going to be holding up appropriations. I mean, it was this kind of arm twisting that goes on. And it's very undemocratic. And it is a betrayal of the social contract that government has in general to serve the people.
Very, very well stated. That's it for my questions. So I'm gonna, if you want to finish up, Tony, that's fine. And then what we'll have is we'll turn over to Matt, Violet, Tamara, and Brian, if you want to have any questions. The open floor.
Well, I'll just finish up by saying, that the kind of the bargain that's in place, what I call an unaccountable bargain, has to change. And that is, Cuban Americans in Congress control US Cuba policy in exchange for political support, or holding US policy or political policies hostage unless they do what's being demanded. And this is not the way to conduct government. And certainly there needs to be an accountable system in place. If these policies are not creating the change that we quote unquote were thought to believe, well, then it's time to change it. It's not fair, it's not right, it's not American. I hope that as we move forward, that we will have more informed, more enlightened, our two enemies in this process, like most things in life, it's either arrogance or ignorance. So we have to keep informing, and we have to keep encouraging people to be more humble and to do the right thing. And it's time we do the right thing regarding Cuba. We are not going to overthrow them with an embargo. We're not going to invade them militarily as long as they don't threaten us. So let's stop this insane policy of hostility and start doing the right thing. And I feel for the political prisoners in Cuba. We don't even have a US ambassador in Cuba who could be advocating for those people and asking, But again, as I said earlier in my talk, we have this unfortunate situation that both sides of the equation are on the extremes and intolerant, intransigent. But remember, I said the rubber band rule. And when you pull a rubber band and you keep pulling the rubber band, at some point it's going to snap. And when it snaps, it comes back and it hits hard, who's ever been pulling it. So that's something else that's got to change. But I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity. And I'll just conclude by saying, may peace prevail, and that may the United States and Cuba be reconciled as the true friends they are and was always meant to be and will be one day in the future. Good thanks to efforts of people like yourself. So thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Tony, and certainly thank Mr. Albert Fox for me. I hope we do get to talk. We'll probably do something similar, maybe in the fall or something. I hope.
Well, I'm sure if you want to have I would suggest, why don't you have a candidate forum? Invite all of them, and you'll see who want to say something.
Okay,
I mean,
well,
this is free media, and you will, if I was running for office, here's, the other commentary about Val Demings, they should give anybody concern, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's it's reality.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party has put in over $30 million to Val Demings' campaign, and she still doesn't outpoll Marco Rubio. And here we are, June. We're now just 4 months away from election day, and it's not even close. So that's the other reason why you shouldn't bypass these process. I mean, Val Demings should look at the primary, if she feels she really is the best candidate, as the warm-up. Go in there and duke it out on the policies, debate, let the voters know what the heck you stand for and what you're going to do. So that way, if you are whoever the nominee is, they can take on Rubio and point out why Rubio is not the best choice to continue to serve in the Senate. And you've got an excellent candidate in Albert Fox, this man who actually knows more about the United States Senate as an institution than any of those guys, probably even more than Marco Rubio, because he worked there as a young man. He spent years. He knows that place frontwards and backwards, and he knows the procedures. He's a remarkable candidate, and he will be an excellent United States Senator for Florida. So, please, I hope that you'll give him a chance and allow Val Demings to debate, and let all the candidates get in there and talk about this very important issue.
I hadn't thought about it. I'm going to seriously think about that. I'd love to see. We'll have to see what happens. But anyway, again, Tony, thank you. Matt, Violet, Tamara, Brian, any questions? Anything on your mind?
I do have one. I don't know if anyone else does, if they want to go first. Good. Okay. So yeah, Antonio, thank you so much for joining today. It's been great listening to you.
Thank you.
Bringing it back to the whole embargo. Obviously it was a big topic today, a big topic in U.S.-Cuban relations. I'm with you 100% that it needs to be lifted. It's completely unfair to the Cuban people. But my question seems simple on the surface, obviously really complex underneath. Just with everything that's been going on the island, with inflation, with protests, with all that, and all that stuff. Who gives way first? Whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years, whatever. The U.S. lifting the embargo, Cuba easing some of their policies. Who, in your eyes, would you say gives way first?
I really think we shouldn't look at it as a contest. It's just simply recognizing that this is not going anywhere. It's not worth it. And we need to extract ourselves out of this dynamic. We're actually in the way of Cuba fixing itself because of this embargo.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to extract ourselves out of that equation. And like I said, instead of using destructive leverage, let's use constructive leverage. As I said, the Cuban American population in the United States has a greater economic capacity than the entire country of Cuba. And out of this, again, this post-traumatic stress disorder, basically, if you want to call it that, they're not using that. And they have, that's the ability, the two sides may not like or hate each other or intolerant or refuse, but the one thing that we could be driving the Cubans towards, which is the one thing that they have in common, all Cubans love Cuba. They're very Cuban. And so if we can guide our policies towards that will kind of change the environment. There's a saying, flowers will grow better in a garden than in a desert. And our behavior with the embargo is creating a desert of the conditions in Cuba, when we could be fertilizing, tilling the soil so that we can create the opportunities for real meaningful change, and which is long overdue. And we need to extract ourselves. This is Cuba's problem. Cuba's got to handle it. There's no reason for us to be so hostile and behave like this. We could be having normal basic trade with them. And we could be teaching them how important it is to have competition. That's the beauty. I mean, we have monopolies suck. Whether they're capitalist, communist, socialist, monopolies, oligopolies suck. They do not, they exist to keep the monopoly in power or the oligopoly in power. They're not there to serve the consumer or the people. So let's change that. And that is something we can do. So let's keep our fingers crossed that that's what will happen. And we'll have leaders in office who will be doing that, and diplomats who will be doing that.
For sure. Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I agree. It's something that needs to be dealt with. I remember when I was there, 2018, I was coming home from playing a baseball game, and I saw a billboard on the side of the road, which was, could have very well been political, a way for the government to get their politics out to the people. But I remember the billboard said, "The embargo is the world's biggest genocide," or something along the lines. And it really made me stop and think that the U.S. Really is doing something that hurts the Cuban people, which, when you think, they're the losers to the whole thing here. So yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of a team effort. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
See, any other questions? Vale, go ahead.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. I'm from Argentina, so it may take a while for me to ask the question. My English is tricky sometimes.
No, si quieres me puedes preguntar en español.
Oh, okay.
No,
I'm gonna try.
El país del buen vino, del buen Malbec y del tango de Sudamérica.
Can you believe I don't drink alcohol? So my question is, I agree with a lot of the things that you said today. And what I was thinking while you were talking was that in Latin America, the general perception is that the reason why the economy in Cuba is failing are not Cuban policies, but the embargo. So I think that is really hurting the resolve of the conflict, because at the same time, it's very different from the perception that the Cubans have of their own policies. But at the same time, Latin America is against the embargo 100%, which
I think is against the embargo.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's very interesting what you've said, and I wrote it down because Cuban Americans oppose sending the embargo so fiercely. So what I'm thinking is that, or that is the perception that we have. So my question is, if you think it's that opposition from Cuban Americans has a lot more to do with Cuba itself, or it's more like a domestic position in terms of the value of their vote, of their influence, more domestically, that it has to do with foreign affairs. I don't know if it makes sense.
It's given the Cuban American community the perception, and in some cases well established, that they're a important voting bloc, and they can't be taken for granted. The only issue that I would pose to them respectfully is, are you using that power to really do well for your homeland? And of course, the pushback you get from that is, well, they're they're communists, they did this, they did that, they said, they, and, the other thing I would say is, well, thank God for the United States, that you're here and you've got this power. Why not use it to do some good? Because is this embargo really doing any good? I say it isn't doing any good.
Yeah.
And why do you want to hurt your own people? Because it's not just the government that's hurt, it's everybody. The embargo is indiscriminate, and that's the problem. And like I said, should, if you want to encourage change, use the power of influence, till the soil, not make it a desert, so that everybody, if we make it, everybody wants to leave. And that's what's happening. So we can change that. And like I said, reconciliation and reconstruction, more important than any other slogan, because that's the reality that Cuba needs right now.
Muchas gracias.
Oh, no, un placer, un placer.
Let's see, anyone else? Any questions? Let's see, Brian. Let's see, I can't think of any questions either. I think you pretty much covered everything, Tony. That was a great session, and it's just.
How can I get a copy of this?
I'll email this to you.
Okay.
Right after this. Don't worry about it. And I hope we can do this again. Thank you again.
Anytime.
Tony,
Anytime.
thank you very much for your time. And even though he wasn't here, please thank Albert Fox.
I'm sure he had an issue that made it impossible.
No.
But
he
again,
mentioned-
I think it'll be very telling for you to invite the candidates to a forum.
Okay.
And see who responds and see who doesn't. This is free media.
You
I'm
know,
running for office, I jump on this, especially on this issue.
I think it's a great idea. I hadn't thought about it. I'm seriously going to think about it because you can have Vale, we can have other international people also join.
Oh, yes,
I
because,
think this would be interesting.
sorry, yes, because like there's a lot of people in Latin America that are eager to hear directly from people instead of reading things in the news and statements that have been edited or whatever. And yeah, I don't know, it's people want to hear directly from other people instead of just reading. So that would be amazing.
I think we'll have to see. I will reach out to Val Demings, but I have a feeling she may not join us. She may send someone else. That's okay, because we at least can engage her platform, her vision, and just consider it. And
Which isn't really any different than Marco Rubio. So
Well,
that's a problem.
Now I won't invite, because there's some people, I hate to say it, you just cannot have a discussion with. It just won't work. But I think let's see what happens. You gave me an idea, Tony. I'm going to pursue it. So I'll keep you all posted. So thank you everyone for joining us. I know, and especially thank you again, Tony, because I know you're very busy. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I will send this recording out to everyone after by the end of the day. Okay.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much, everyone.
All
Bye.
right.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Vale. I will see you, and gracias, Tamara.
Nos vemos.
Have a great day. Bye.